Hi, welcome to the Couch Lit Book Club. I'm Lena.
And I'm Lauren.
And we would love for you to kick back and relax with us while we talk everything reading. Before we begin, we do want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we're recording on, the Yagara and Turrbal people of the Meanjin Nation. Sovereignty has never been ceded, it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So today we are talking about my favorite book element, romance. So I was actually never a big reader until I was maybe like 15 because I just hadn't found what I liked yet. My dad read a lot of fantasy, so I thought that I liked fantasy. I didn't. I was a bit confused until I read The Selection by Kiera Cass.
I am familiar with these books. Yeah. I remember picking them up from like QED, we're on a family holiday. Oh, back when I was like 14, 15. So good.
The beautiful dresses. It's like the Bachelorette TV series or reality TV show. But anyway, now say what you like about the series. When I was 15, I ate that shit up. I loved it. It was amazing. As an adult, I can definitely admit that I'd most definitely despised these books. But yeah, as a teen, yum, yum, yum. Anyway, romance became and still is my favorite element in any story. So like fantasy. If it's fantasy and it has a bit of romance in it, hey, I'll give it a go. If it's a bit of sci-fi and it's got some romance in it, I'll give it a bit of a go. But I am strictly talking just a bit of romance. I'm not talking romance as the main plot of those genres. I'm not really into romantasy and all that. But I found that romance is that one element that if it's included in a book, I am most likely going to be able to read it. So the ABC actually recently reported that there's been a 37% increase in romance fiction sales across Australia in 2023.
That is massive. And I think I can say that I have definitely been a part of that increase. I didn't really pick up romance books until recently, but even so, like, that really shocks me how large of an increase that is.
Yeah, it doesn't really shock me though, because I feel like the romance genre is so broad and everyone can get something out of it. You've just got to find what you like in it. So I'm not that shocked by that stat, and I'm so glad that people are picking up romance books. It's also been 50 years since the renowned Mills and Boon collection was launched. I actually have a little bit of a funny story about that, where I read my first Mills and Boon book at 15. It was very sexy, very smutty, loved it, went home and told my mum, and then found out that my grandma also read Mills and Boon, and I was instantly disgusted. And
not really the common interest you want to have with your grandma.
No, and I have never picked one up since, and I don't know if I ever will be able to. I don't want to be reading the same sex that my grandma's also read. So why do we love the genre so much? For me, it's the instant giddiness and happiness that I get from a lighthearted romance. They're fun. But sometimes I also love the drama of it all, because rightly so, my romantic life is not very dramatic, but I do crave some chaos every now and then.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, romance is escapism, right?
Absolutely. And as long as it's not happening in my life, I love it. But I also think there are many lessons to be learnt within the genre, whether that's good or not so good. So for example, learning how to healthily communicate with a significant other. A lot of books do showcase that. Or maybe it's the opposite and it's actually falling into the trap of staying in a toxic relationship, because that's what they do in the books you consume.
No, you're so right. And I think, like we were talking about last episode when we were chatting about self-help, you can find self-help elements from books and from romance books. Like, you can find situations and draw from them and learn from them, and that's so-called self-help, when in fact it's a romance. And I think that's great. So I think one of the great things about romance books is that there are so many different types of books within romance, and by that I mean tropes. These different themes that in romance books really shine. And yes, tropes do exist in every genre, but often they can make or break a romance story for so many people. So some of the most popular tropes are the likes of enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, forbidden love, love triangles, and fake dating. And often people will choose romance books based on the trope that they like and that they know will bring them comfort, bring them joy. For example, I would never pick up a friends to lovers book because I kind of think they're a bit cringe, and also I'm just not a big fan of friends to lovers situation in real life. Maybe that's just a personal ick that I have, but like I would definitely pick up a forbidden love book. That sounds so juicy. And a love triangle book, that's like a thriller to me, because that I couldn't handle that. That's too much in real life, but reading that, I couldn't imagine being in that situation. So that's what makes it fun. And if you've ever been on the reading side of TikTok, you know that romance novels are the hottest genre right now. So like Lena mentioned earlier, romance fiction sales have increased massively over the past year. And to continue the discussion of why, I think it's a bit of a chicken or the egg situation. So has an increase in romance novels boosted the genre's popularity, or are more authors writing more romance novels because of the genre's popularity? And I say maybe both at the same time. I think a trend that is definitely true, though, is authors writing romance books that fit certain tropes that they know will be popular online. Like, I don't really know too much about the publishing industry, but, you know, it makes sense that they want to make a buck, right? So, of course, they're going to look online, they're going to look at the trends, they're going to see what people want to read, and maybe, I don't know, encourage people to read that, pick up books that fit that trope. And, you know, TikTok is such a powerful organic marketing tool, so, again, it makes sense to do this. But does this dampen the book's legitimacy, its enjoyment, or even the quality?
No.
No?
I don't think so. Personally, I have already been through my phase of reading really easy, trashy books that would, you know, pop off on TikTok. Now, that's not to say that I do not love TikTok sensations. I love Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
Oh,
there's been a few other ones out there as well.
Me too.
But we are talking specifically the romance genre that really plays on that trope. So I don't think so because, firstly, whatever gets you reading.
Yeah.
If you find that a book on TikTok is really easy to consume and you really enjoy the content, but the rest of the bookish world says, you know, that's not a real book. The writing's not very good. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Because if that's what's going to get you reading, then that's what's going to get you reading. But I must also admit that I find it very frustrating to go into a bookstore trying to find a romance book and it just be segregated into tropes, because tropes are so popular now on TikTok. And because TikTok's following is so big, it's now influencing how bookshops also market their books.
Yeah.
So I think it all ties in together a bit. But Ali Hazelwood is a fantastic example of someone who's blown up on TikTok and has very trope-heavy books. And so many people love her books. I just know that content isn't going to be what I like and I'm not going to vibe with it, and that's more than okay.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think personally I would find it frustrating if, you know, the story was second to the trope. I would hate the trope to sacrifice the story for the sake of being branded as a certain trope just to get sales, because often, you know, well, in my opinion, I don't think the trope should be the center of the story. We want plot, we want characters, we want juiciness. We don't just want trope.
Yeah, I think a trope should be treated more like, hey, I like that vibe. I like a book when that's included, rather than I like that trope and any book that follows that trope die hard. You know what I mean?
You also don't want to put yourself in a box. You kind of want to be open to reading other things and maybe discover that you like that trope, but just in a different book. Maybe you just didn't like it in this plot over here. So I think, just leave yourself open. If a book does blow up on TikTok because it did follow a trending trope, great for them.
My favourite trope is actually enemies to lovers. There's just something so intense about reading characters who absolutely despise each other to finding appreciation and care for each other. Also, the first sex scene is usually pretty freaking hot. Must say so myself. And Lauren, I know you're not as much of a romance reader as I am.
Yeah, definitely not. I think I've never really been a romance reader. In fact, I've kind of avoided it. And I think that's kind of because of internalized misogynistic reasons, which I kind of hate. So I've actually recently been reading more romance novels and I've been loving them. I've been reading a lot of Emily Henry and, you know, Fourth Wing, which is a fantasy book, but it's heavy on the romance there, and I loved it. So I think just based on the few books I have read, I really think that enemies to lovers is probably my favorite genre. Like in Fourth Wing, you know, the relationship was so juicy, and combined with fantasy, it was really the perfect combo for some great escapism. So yeah, I'm leaning towards enemies to lovers. So tell me a bit more.
Yeah, so on top of those book recs from you, Lauren, I've also got another two. Now, these books are not, you know, amazing by any means, but they're fun. And I personally really enjoyed them, but they do have their flaws. And I just wanted to preface with that. So the first one is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, which also includes the trope of fake dating. And I would say the enemies to lovers and fake dating tropes are pretty half-half in this book.
For a romance newbie, can you please explain what fake dating in the trope world means?
Yeah, so that basically means two characters who have to come together and pretend to date. And usually they fall in love.
Tale as old as time, right?
Yeah. So predictable. But I love it. I love how predictable it is. So anyway, the Young Honeymooners, we follow Olive and Ethan, who are forced to put their hatred aside and play newlyweds at an all-inclusive honeymoon in Hawaii. How did they get into this position? Well, Olive's sister and Ethan's brother got married. There was a buffet at the wedding, and Olive and Ethan, for whatever reasons, did not actually touch the buffet. Well, they were the only ones who didn't get sick from this buffet, and the only plausible conclusion would be that they have to then take the places of the bride and the groom on this all-inclusive honeymoon in Hawaii. So, when they get to Hawaii, they obviously hate each other. But they have to stay in a hotel room, and they run into a few people, both that Olive and Ethan know, that cause a bit of complications about faking their dating or faking their marriage at this point, actually. And it just makes it really interesting, and they choose... There were some questionable choices made throughout this book, and some miscommunication, but also some great communication. And basically, it was really fun. And I think it's a really easy read, and it's also very out loud funny. So I really highly recommend it. I've read it 3 times. The 3rd time was actually this month in the lead up to this episode. So I really, really do enjoy it.
That sounds like something I'd enjoy. It sounds really similar to the plot of Anyone But You, which it's a movie featuring Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney. And I was like, oh, this seems cheesy, like just a cheap little romance. Oh, I ate it up. It was so good. So yeah, maybe this book's for me too.
Yeah. The second book I want to talk about is a male-male romance, and it's really cute. It's called Top Secret by Serena Bowen and Eld Kennedy. So we follow these 2 frat guys named Keaton and Luke, who are totally different. Keaton is a jock and a secret geek, while Luke is a finance major and a secret male dancer. They do all they can to avoid each other in their frat house, but then things get interesting when Keaton's girlfriend wants a threesome for her birthday. You can try and guess the end.
Oh, this is so juicy.
Oh, it's juicy, okay. It's so good. I've actually reread this book 5 times since I first read it in 2020, which I read it in one sitting. It was that good. It satisfied all my itches, including my craving for smutty romance, emotional connection, and also self-discovery, because this book is more than just a bit of smut and more than just 2 frat guys who, possibly end up getting it on. They actually have some really interesting and deep obstacles and confrontations to overcome throughout the story. And I think it's one of those books that you can get a lesson from, like what I mentioned previously. It's still my favorite romance to date.
Yeah, just continuing on the conversation of enemies to lovers, I do want to say that, even though I do enjoy the enemies to lovers books that I have read, doesn't mean you'll enjoy every enemies to lovers books. And this is what we were saying before about don't let a trope define you, because it's probably only going to limit you. Oh, that sounded cheesy and deep, but you know what I mean. And the prime example of this is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Oh my God. No, thumbs down. Like, this was... Neither of us finished this book. No. We couldn't get through it. And it kind of had everything that we should love in it. So the plot is basically the son of the American president and the prince of something.
The United Kingdom.
The United Kingdom. Anyway, they kind of hate each other. And then they end up like... It's kind of will they, won't they, even though it's so obvious that they will. And it's just back and forward, childish nonsense. It was so dull. And... yeah, it got turned into a movie or a TV show as well, or something, which I didn't watch because the book was so boring. The book was so boring.
I just don't care. Simple as that. It was cringe. It was really cringe. Like, we were supposedly following these young adults, but it felt like we were following maybe like 16-year-olds. Yeah, and I don't know, the dynamics between like the best friends and the siblings and the mom and the president. Well, yeah, it was a female president in this book. I don't know. I just felt like it was really juvenile and not that it has to be realistic, but it was just too far-fetched for me. Yeah. I ended up DNFing at 30% or 40% or something like that.
We stopped reading at about the same point.
We were texting each other going, how are you going with this? Because we were reading at the same time, and it was like struggle street.
Yeah, not good. Yeah. I think, what it was kind of lacking for me was that strong character development and like a really sturdy, engaging storyline. The trope should be the icing on top. If the trope is the foundation, that's when things fall apart. And that's exactly what happened here.
And I think this is a great example of the trope, it being too trope heavy.
Yeah.
So we are now moving on to smut. We're going to be talking sex. So if you aren't a big fan of this,
sex, baby.
If you aren't a big fan of this, please skip ahead a few minutes. But if you want to stick around, Yeah, let's get hot and
talk about
steamy.
sex.
So, first of all, you guys over on our Instagram told us that you could pretty much take it or leave it when it comes to smut. I personally love a bit of smut, but it is very mood dependent. Some days I really want some smut and I want it to be full of it. But other days I'm kind of feeling more of a romance with a bit of a soft touch to it, you know? Yeah. So, smut. What place does it have in a book, or what place does it have in our lives? For me personally, it is actually my form of porn. So I don't enjoy porn. I've never really got off to it or anything like that. It's actually, just not my cup of tea. However, I discovered smut in books, and turns out that actually does get me going. And I think this is a really good conversation to have about the ethics of porn and the ethics of smut.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that makes so much sense, right? Because romance is so often written for the girlies. And I have no doubt that so many women use smut novels as a form of porn. And in this case, a much more ethical form of porn. Because it's fictional, right? Mm-hmm. And it's written down, and it's actually, in fact, much likely more to be tailored to women rather than porn, which, typically always centers the men. Now, that's not always the case, but I think you're much likely to find such a more safer, ethical, gentler option in the version of smut.
I also feel that smut can offer a lot of lessons. We can learn a lot from it, like we do from porn. Now, there's lots of discussions happening right now, actually, about the lessons that we are learning from porn and how detrimental that can be to the emerging generations. But I want to say that by reading smut, you can learn consent. You can learn how to navigate consent. Some books do it really well and it's really smooth and seamless. But then other books, they show the reality of it being awkward. Because not every time you go to fuck someone, the consent is going to be smooth sailing. A lot of the time it's actually going to be awkward. And by reading books that feature that, it does make you feel more comfortable when it comes to that point in time, if you ever do come across it.
I think on that same note, there's also instances, there's always going to be a bad egg in the bunch. There's always going to be examples of smut that, probably teach you bad lessons. But, that's like any media. And, in this situation, the one that comes to mind is of course, 50 Shades of Grey. But there's a 50 Shades of Grey in every single media.
Absolutely. I also feel like it's a great way to explore your own sexuality, whether you're confused about who you're attracted to, whether you are even asexual as well. There's ace representation out there in romance books.
It's a great point.
There's queer romance books. There's fantasy queer romance books. I just read...
there's a lot of fantasy queer romance books.
I just read a fantasy romance book called Elf Defense, and it literally featured an elf polyamorous relationship. So there's something out there for everyone. But I also find that it's a great way to discover what you potentially like in the bedroom. There might be things on, when you watch porn visually, that really grosses you out, but you actually feel, oh, maybe I could be interested in that, but porn is not portraying it the way that you want to experience it. But in the books, it actually is portrayed that way. So I feel like it's also a really good way to find out what you may be interested in, what you might not be interested in.
It's like soft launching yourself into exploring that, rather than, because I think a written stimulus is a lot less intense than a visual kind of representation sometimes. Baby steps.
Yeah, and I feel like you can, when you read a smut book, you can take it at your own pace.
So yeah, that's really true. I also want to just say that smut often does get a bad rap, because people love to make fun of women's hobbies. And like I said, smut is often, and romance books are often tailored for women. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with reading romance and smut. It's the same as every genre. It has plot elements and all of these elements of every other genre, but people just like to make fun of women for being overly interested into this idea of true love and something a bit more whimsical and, but... Yeah, I think we're getting rid of that taboo. We're ending that right here on this podcast. We're ending that taboo.
Absolutely. And this is not to say that there are not smutty books out there for the male gaze as well.
Yeah.
Go over to Reddit. Reddit has so many recommendations about smutty books for the male gaze. So I highly recommend visiting Reddit.
A new segment that we're going to start including towards the end of each episode is Media Spotlight, where we're going to chat about the hottest goss in the literature zeitgeist. So today in Media Spotlight, we're obviously talking about the current book on the chopping block, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Now, if you're not aware of this book and its movie adaptation, honestly, good for you. I'm truly happy for you. You probably sleep well at night. But if you haven't, here's a quick rundown. So Lily Blossom Bloom, yes, that's her name, moves to Boston to chase her lifelong dream of opening her own business, a flower shop. Very on the nose. A chance meeting with charming neurosurgeon Ryle Kincaid soon sparks an intense connection. But as the two fall deeply in love, she begins to see sides of Ryle that remind her of her parents' relationship. When Lily's first love, Atlas Corrigan, suddenly re-enters her life, her relationship with Ryle gets upended, leaving her with an impossible choice. Okay, so I know it may not be obvious from that description, but this book is actually about domestic violence, and that's not an underlying theme. The title, It Ends With Us, is literally referring to the cycle of abuse ending as, their relationship comes to an end. So the book has recently been adapted into a movie directed by Justin Baldoni, who also plays Ryle, and Blake Lively, who plays Lily. Again, if you haven't seen the controversy around this, good for you. But that's what we're going to discuss today. And I just want to preface this segment with the fact that, I'm a bit of a Colleen Hoover hater. No, I haven't read any of her books, but from everything I've heard about them, even what people who like them have told me, they don't really sound like my cup of tea. To me, they don't really seem all that tightly written, the female characters seem a bit hollow, and the bad behaviour of male characters is often excused. In saying that, this is just my opinion and I haven't read it. So if you found yourself really connecting with Colleen's writing, I do not want to take that away from you. This is just my experience with her writing and literature. So in saying that, we're not going to focus on the content of the book itself, but rather the way it and the movie, which has just come out, has been marketed.
Yeah, so the marketing. To me, it seems like they've tried to do a Barbenheimer premiere with It Ends With Us and Deadpool, which has just flopped really badly. So if you don't know, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are married, and Deadpool has also just come out in cinemas. So they've launched similarly, and it seems like Blake Lively is maybe trying to be that cool, calm and collected person like her husband.
But let's just add in this situation, she thinks that she is the Barbie movie.
Yes, but she does.
If anything, if this scenario was true, It Ends With Us is so the Oppenheimer in the situation.
Absolutely. It's very serious, and then it should be serious, let's say that, and then you've got Deadpool, which is funny. Absolutely, I agree. But what they're doing with the marketing as well, that's really similar to the Barbie premiere, is Blake Lively is going around saying, wear your florals to the movie.
She's dressing on theme.
But it's like, should you really be dressing in florals to a film that is literally a film about domestic violence? What does that actually say? What does it actually portray the movie as in the marketing?
It says that they're trivializing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think then combined with the fact that there's no content warning, it just makes it even worse, right?
Yeah. So I don't think I think the marketing that they've gone with actually markets this as a rom-com. And I do think this is on purpose. And you have a theory about this.
I do have a theory about this because this is not a romance movie. This is a drama movie. And, I think my theory is, if I put my tinfoil hat on, is that because Hollywood knows they make too much money without content warnings, they don't care if people have a good or bad time. If people go into the cinema not knowing it's a movie about domestic violence and they go in, they think they're going to see something light and fluffy and they come out distraught because maybe they've experienced this and, they want to protect themselves from having to, experiences be re-traumatized, and this movie may have done that for some people and it may not for others. But I think, what responsibility do the creators of the movie and the author have to their audiences? And I think a content warning is the bare minimum.
Absolutely, I agree. And I don't think there's a content warning in the novel itself.
No.
By Colleen Hoover. And I do want to say Colleen Hoover has written this book from her own experience, so we're not commenting on that at all. But Colleen Hoover herself has not been is not exempt from dodgy marketing. She actually released a colouring book for It Ends With Us.
That's just, yeah. No.
How tone deaf is that?
It's so tone deaf. That's exactly what it is. And Blake Lively is, coming out with her new skincare brand, while wearing her florals, while talking about this movie. And also it's the fact that it's not only the fact that they're doing it while doing this movie, whatever. They're doing it while not acknowledging the content of the movie and pretending it's something that it's not.
Yeah, so it's similar to Hollywood marketing the musicals that have just recently come out in cinema. Willy Wonka and Mean Girls. I personally was keen to go see them, and then I didn't go see them because I found out that they were musicals. So I guess I'm a perfect example of why Hollywood is keeping these content warnings, or the actual theme of the content secret.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of felt the same. I'm not really big into musicals. But the thing with this instance is that not giving content warnings is not only like, if you go see it, you won't enjoy it. It's like, no, if you won't see it, it's actually could be really harmful. And it's just, I think that responsibility should really be in place here.
Moving on now to Raw Dog, The Naked Truth About Hot Dogs by Jamie Loftus. Someone in this room didn't read it. Lauren, what do you have to say for yourself?
Oh, I guess I just raw dogged this one.
Man.
Sorry, in my defense, I've been spending the past few weeks reading romance books for this episode, so it was
she actually just discovered romance.
This is so true. It was either I read the book of the month, the book club pick, or I read romance, and I didn't have time to do it all.
Fair enough. Now, I loved this book. Oh my gosh. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. It's 4 stars. I gave it 4 stars. So I absolutely love the concept of heading on a road trip to conduct research.
About hot dogs.
About hot dogs of all things. And Jamie Loftus actually alludes in her book to possibly another book based on a road trip as well.
With a different food?
With different food.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm pretty keen if she gets around to that. Anyways, it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be, which actually shocked me in a good way. I thought it was going to be just like really lighthearted, funny, and just a bit like not so serious, but it actually got pretty serious. So it had many conversations about world events and issues, including poverty and the ill treatment of animals and staff in the production of hot dogs. Jamie Loftus, she did this during the lockdowns that were still happening in the USA in 2021, and she decided to actually reach out to some of the facilities and research how the staff were getting treated, because a lot of them were immigrants. Turns out, and not shockingly, they weren't treated well. And they actually neglected their staff a lot. And a lot of them died from COVID-19 because they weren't allowed to stop working. So it was pretty devastating to hear that. But also the way that animals are not protected a lot over in the USA within these facilities as well. And I think Australia does have a little bit more protections in place, from my knowledge anyway, which was really interesting to learn about. But going back to the lighthearted nature of this book, it was also fucking hilarious. It was fucking funny. I could not stop laughing. Like, if you looked at me in the car, because I listened to this on audiobook, if you looked over to me in the car, you would have been like, what the fuck is this chick on? And some other little elements in here was there was a relationship breakdown. She actually started the road trip with a boyfriend.
Oh.
She ended the road trip without a boyfriend. There was also a dog as a travel companion. They ended up staying at a motel where there was high murder rates as well. Yeah, really, really interesting journey to go on. But throughout the book, and it's mentioned quite a lot, is how would you feel after eating 4 hot dogs a day?
I can't imagine she would feel well.
No, and she does mention that quite a lot. Physically, emotionally, and mentally, it really drained her.
You would crave veggies, right?
Yeah,
or
but
just
then
anything else.
But then she also ended up craving hot dogs at some point as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and she just talks about how mentally straining it is to have to keep on eating hot dogs and to keep on just like
it's funny because it's so absurd, but it sounds so interesting.
Yeah, and like I guess I didn't think she was eating 4 hot dogs a day, but she was literally eating 4 hot dogs a day.
Oh, that's my nightmare. I hate hot dogs.
I know. She did mention though, Ben's chili bowl is one of her favorites. And it's in Washington, D.C. And I'm actually heading to Washington, D.C. Later this year. So I'm going to try and make a little stop to Ben's Chili Bowl. And I'll let you guys know how it goes. I'll give you guys a little review. But then just to end this book discussed serious conversations and topics. It then went on to talk about, eating hot dogs every single day and what that does to you physically, mentally, and emotionally. Then it also sexualized food. And I didn't even know you could sexualize food until I read this book.
Well, I guess it's a really phallic food, It
is.
The shape of it.
It is. But that's not necessarily what was sexualized.
Interesting.
Something called gender pickles. I'm going to leave you with that.
I'm going to Google that later.
Gender pickles. Really, really weird. It's very American. Very American, in my opinion. But then there's also the Wienermobile.
Come again?
The Wienermobile. It's a like a van shaped as a hot dog that sells hot dogs.
You would hope.
But it's just weird and uncomfortable in every single way. It's just ill. I don't even want to say any more because you guys need to go and read it to find out how uncomfortable it is. I was in the car gripping my steering wheel going, this is disgusting and uncomfortable. Get this fucking segment over. I want to get past this chapter.
Okay, this book sounds so absurd, but you've fully sold me on this. I know I didn't get around to it this month, but at the time of recording right now, we've still got a few days left of August, so I think I can squeeze it in because, yeah, you've sold me. This sounds really fascinating. I think I'd learn something. Might even make me hate hot dogs more, though.
I'm keen to try some when I go to the States. I think I've been inspired to try hot dogs.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, to wrap up the episode, we want to announce our book club read for September. So with only one vote separating 7 Days in June by Tia Williams and Book Lovers by Emily Henry over on our Instagram poll, September's read is Book Lovers. So I've recently been reading Emily Henry. I have actually just finished Beach Read, which I really, really enjoyed. We didn't want to put it down. I was flipping the pages. I was really engaged. So I'm so excited that this one won in the poll and I can't wait to read. So, Nora Stevens' life is books. She reads them all. And she's not that type of heroine. Not the plucky one, not the laid-back dream girl, and especially not the sweetheart. In fact, the only people Nora is a heroine for are her clients, for whom she lands enormous deals as a cutthroat literary agent. She ends up taking to Sunshine Falls, North Carolina for the month of August with her sister. But to make things interesting, she is constantly bumping into Charlie Lastra, a bookish brooding editor from back in the city. It would be a meet cute if not for the fact that they've met many times and it's never been cute. If Nora knows she's not an ideal heroine and Charlie knows he's nobody's hero, can a string of coincidences unravel the carefully crafted stories they've written about themselves? It sounds great. I mean, I like that a lot of her writing is about people who read books, people in the book industry, because you write what you know, right? That's when things are good. And I think that's what makes her characters so believable. So I'm really looking forward to reading this.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. I have always had Emily Henry on my radar. And I've never picked her up. Not because I don't want to, but I think because I just know I'm going to really like her book, so I can pick her book up at any time.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad I've got this prompt now to actually pick up her book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited. If you want to join us this September reading a bit of Emily Henry, join us over on our Instagram. We'll be giving some updates over there. You can engage, tell us what you think. So yeah.
Read up, bitches.